living in the scriptures of Revelation. They gotta separate church and state.
Welcome to Church and State, where we boldly take on the collision of two topics that often brings about energetic and polarizing discussions: politics and religion. You can't talk about it at the dinner table. It can get heated at the barbershop. But we're going to talk about it right here.
I am New York State Assemblywoman Latrice Walker.
And I am Reverend Dr. Robert Waterman.
And together we are Church and State.
Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we'll discuss the role of God in the White House. Does it matter to voters? Should it matter to voters? The presidential election, of course, is the hottest topics of the year as voters decide between Democrat Vice President Kamala Harris and Republican former President Donald Trump.
Hello, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Latrice Walker, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying our podcast as much as we've enjoyed putting it together. God in the White House. Let's get into it. Of the 47 presidents of the United States, all but 2 are said to have been Christians, the exceptions being Thomas Jefferson, our 3rd president, and Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president. Of the Christian presidents, most of them have been Protestants. 2, John F. Kennedy and Joe Biden, were Catholic. Most of them, to varying degrees, have talked about their faith either as presidential candidates or while in the office. But during the current election cycle, we haven't heard a discussion about faith or God. God wasn't mentioned in the September debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump, which drew 67.1 million voters. What is the message here? Is faith no longer important in the White House? According to a survey of registered voters, 71% of the people believe that religion should be separate from the government. About 56% of Trump supporters say religion and government should be kept separate. And before Biden withdrew from the race, about 86% of his supporters said that religion should be separate from government. The survey also found that most Trump supporters, about 69%, want the Bible to have some level of influence on the laws of the United States. Conversely, the same percentage of Biden supporters, again, that's before he withdrew from the race, believe that the Bible should have little or no influence on the laws of the country. One of the most interesting data points is that when the will of the people conflicts with the Bible, about 45% of Trump supporters believe that the Bible should take precedence. Only 15% of Biden supporters say the Bible should have more weight than the will of the people. So my question to you, Reverend Dr. Waterman, does any of this inform how you would advise Christians to vote in the election?
First of all, I just want to agree with you that there were a majority of our presidents or founding fathers were a part of some type of religious experience. Even, I know you quoted Abraham Lincoln, but Abraham Lincoln actually grew up a Baptist. And growing up as a Baptist in his household, he did not practice it or was affiliated with any church. But if you look at the historical past and you look at his pathway even to about the end of his term as president before his assassination, he used a lot of what we call divine purpose. And he would use scripture to help get through the trials and tribulations that he's been going through during that period of time. So yes, faith is very significant. It's very important that we actually understand that it's a part of our Constitution, that it's been there, it is there. It creates what we call some type of morals and values and ethics that occurs through the way that people live and make judgments. So it shapes our morals, it shapes our ethical views on what we look for when it comes down to elected officials. So if I had to advise people, I kind of sort of understand that even when the debate that was happening between President Trump and Vice President Harris is that religion did not come up in the debate. Because if you look at her past, she's kind of Hinduist and she's married to a Jewish man. So therefore, I'm quite sure that some type of religious experience is that she holds in her personal view. But it didn't come up, but yet Trump runs on it. So does it have to come up? Is faith visible, or is it an action part? Is it just who you are? Our Jewish brothers and sisters, when you look at them, they don't go around advertising their faith. It is a part of who they are. So I believe that Christians and Protestants are the same way, that we don't wear a sign that says I'm a Christian. We just are who we are. So we are a Christian, and we practice that. I believe that if I had to give any type of guidance to people when it comes down to faith in government, I would really just tell them that, first of all, they got to pray. There's some type of prayer that has to occur, which encourages us to seek God for wisdom and discernment and which candidates that we choose. And not only that, because we got to understand that sometimes we can make judgment based upon how we feel and emotions. And I think a lot of us move on emotions when it comes down to the electoral process. We did the black thing with Obama. We didn't even ask for policies. We didn't ask for anything. We just said, he's a black man, he's running. And so all the black people just started voting because he was black. Do we now do the same thing? Because remember, we did have a woman that ran, was Hillary. So now we're saying we have a colored woman and we have a woman. So she holds two. Are we running on emotions, or are we moving on policy? So the first thing I say is we got to pray, seek guidance. If you don't pray and seek guidance, you really won't get God's input on your decision. The second thing I'll say is you got to do your research. You got to research the candidates. This is not about just sitting back and saying, I accept the fact that these two people are running. One is a white male, another one's a colored woman. And with that perspective, do I just vote based upon their culture, their view, who they are as a person? But what is the policy behind it? What do each candidate have? So research your candidates. Third thing I would say, engage with community. You got to engage with community. I think a lot of people fail to do that when it really comes down to the electoral process, even from our local levels, from district leader, city council, assembly, senate, congressional, all of that. We don't actually engage with the community until it's time to vote. Voting for me is a extensive process. It's not just something you do at the time of election. It's something that you have to engage with as a continued process. So even with that, once you engage with the community, then you can actually consider what we call key issues. What are the issues that affect you, not just as a Christian, because as a pastor, I need my people to fully understand what are some of the issues that affect you. What's going to be down the line? What can each candidate give and contribute to your life to bring it up, to encourage you to live a better life? So that itself, again, is considering the key issues, and vote with integrity. You know, a lot of people just voting because somebody told me to vote. No, you got to use all of you when it comes down to voting, and with that, I just close it with that saying, stay informed. Stay informed.
You mentioned local elections, and I know we're talking here about the White House, but there is a lot of sort of public debate around one of the propositions in this election. There was a letter that was released, and actually is dated October 24th. There's a coalition of Western New York faith leaders that are going to be gathering in Rochester today to voice their opposition to Proposal 1. Proposal 1, it will be on the New York ballot, and it is an amendment that they believe will undermine religious liberties, parental rights, and girls-only sports, among other things. And then they say, let's stand together to defeat Proposal 1. Many of them, many of the individuals who signed this particular letter are all different factions of a religious community under the Coalition to Protect Kids New York. Now, let's go to proposal number 1, which will be on the ballot. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws of this state. No person shall, because of race, color, ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, creed, or religion, or sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy, be subjected to any discrimination in their civil rights by any person or by any firm, corporation, or institution, or by the state or any agency or subdivision of the state pursuant to law. So there's a lot to unpack in that proposal number 1, right? And as a Black woman, I believe that we are watching a number of the laws that were given to us in the Constitution, in the preamble, and the Bill of Rights begin to change to go back to a place where we were not protected by those varying documents. And so, yes, I want to see the state of New York stand up for race, ethnicity, and all of the other things that were delineated in this particular proposal, because everyone seems to make this about abortion and leaving out all of the amazing protections that are listed within the particular proposal. Let's just go to race, ethnicity, age, disability, sex.
I mean, we deal with that itself. It has to be, because to these days you have to actually give definition to everything now. It's not no normal of the norm, because before, when it dealt with sex, it was male and female. So does that word still hold the same definition? So we're asking from a humane perspective, everybody should be protected, right? But when you start breaking down different terms, then you really have to ask that question: what and how are we protecting? Are we protecting families? Are we protecting heterosexuals? Are we protecting the LGBTQ plus IA? What are we talking about protecting when it comes down to that term sex? Because based upon a biblical connotation, sex is male and female. So if I'm going from a moral perspective as a faith-based person, then I only see sex as two sex, male and female. Now, if you're asking me to agree if there's more sexes, then that leaves a question mark on what are we protecting? Are we protecting animals? Are we protecting, the grains? As soon as people say protect the trees, as the nature say. So it seems like we're coming down to a point where we have to put a bill to protect everything, and nothing's bad, everything's good. So how do we break that down based upon the proposal that's offering? What is it that these faithful leaders are actually asking? Because that would be the question. Because if it's going against their liberties of what they consider what a family is, from a religious perspective, they would be saying that we're not protected. Because it seems as though that for real talk is that everything that gets protected goes against a faith person's belief and morals.
So what it appears here is that there are a number of different things that are included within those protections, right? I didn't see much that was talking about animals, et cetera, but I do see things that are important with respect to civil rights. Mm-hmm. And now there are a number of different groups who have gone to court in order to assert their particular civil rights. Mm-hmm. And many of these things, of course, are based on under women's rights, based under racial challenges in court. And it's, quite frankly, whenever we saw that there were a lot of these court cases, they came up based on the Equal Protection Clause. Mm-hmm. And so in this regard, because this particular proposal speaks about the autonomy of the reproductive process, should we cast out the baby with the bathwater, forget all of the other protections that are in place simply because there is opposition out loud to one particular area, and that's the area of gender identity expression and female reproductive rights?
So, from a faith-based perspective, it's very difficult to go against what you believe. If you believe that there's only two sex, if you believe that abortion is against God's policy, then it's difficult to accept the good with what you consider bad. So again, you're asking individuality. And that's why we have what we call this democratic process, is that we have the freedom to do what? To protest against what we don't believe or protest for what we believe. So with that itself, am I a bad person? Because it seems as though that if we don't get along with what quote-unquote society desires to go, the direction they want to go, then that person becomes wrong. So I'm no longer going to be your friend because you don't approve of my sex. No, that's not, has nothing to do with our friendship. That should be separate based upon how you live your sexual life versus us being friends. But it seems as though the sexuality have been brought into every conversation to the point where I can't tell a difference, even as a pastor. Are we talking about you as a person, or are we talking about your sexual desire? Which I, as a heterosexual, don't bring up my sexual desires or who I want to love every time I talk about it. I just love who I want to love and keep it moving. But when it comes down to when we talk about proposals and bills and everything, it seems as though it has to define that sexuality, your gender loving, whatever you decide to love, it has to be defined. Why is that? So are the people considered people, or are they considered sex?
But one of the things that you said, right, it makes me think about when people with the race conversation, where a lot of people say, I don't see race.
Mm-hmm.
I see human beings.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that there are many different hues, there are many different experiences for many different individuals. And just because you don't see race as a thing, or just because in this context you don't see, and when I say you, I don't mean you directly, it's just you like person, don't see gender identity differences or the diversity of gender identity and what that experience that person may be going through or what their sexuality is, it doesn't mean that it's not a part of their experiences and things that they should be protected from based on humanity, right? So when we talk about religion, we're also talking about morality, we're talking about humanity, we're talking about political ethics, integrity, and all of those things sort of wrapped up into one. But the interesting thing about when we get back to governance is that there's no such thing as a perfect bill, right? And so a lot of times what has to happen in many of the bills or legislation that gets passed and become law is that we have what's called omnibus bills. And we have to include a number of different protections sort of all wrapped up and connected into one. Mm-hmm. And so does that mean that we should pass an equal protection bill based on race, a separate one based on ethnicity? And then when we do that now, in order to get included into the New York State Constitution, it has to pass twice in the New York State legislature, and then it has to be put on the ballot for the people to make a decision on it. And so then it becomes every year we're going to have to keep doing this 13, and if we sort of break it all out, it could be over a decade before we actually get the core of these protections in place. So should government wait Should the people wait in order to pull all these things out separately? Or can it pass and not necessarily be looked at as an immoral government, but just a government that is protecting the people in the varying different instances that they bring to the fore?
And I'm glad you brought up race, because race played a major part in decisions before even President Trump and Vice President Harris. Remember back, the sexuality changed when a black man couldn't date a white woman, and it was law. And that changed when you were not able to show affection on the streets, and that changed. And now, we're now to the point of accepting multiple different sexualities, and that changed. Well, how far do we go when it comes down to sexuality, if we want to just deal with that, right? Free love. During the 60s, 70s, wasn't that the free love era, the hippie era, where everybody was loving everybody, wearing dashikis and afros and all of that, and out of that, what came? Came a lot of, from my perspective, weed wasn't legal, but they were smoking it. That free love kind of took it out of. I'm not sure, but I just want to make mention. I know a lot of different type of sexual diseases and stuff came out. You can correct me. That came out of that era of free love. So the question again is that, do I have to wear my sexuality on the outside for somebody to judge me of what I am? If you apply for a job, it's not based upon your sexuality or who you love. It's based upon your knowledge of what you know. I hire you because you're knowledgeable in this area and you can help the business. But are we going to now go to the point where we got to hire people based upon their sex? I thought we got away from that when it was dealing with the color. But it seemed like from color of your skin to now sexual of your desire to what's next. So we have these parties that are going up against one another. One feels that there's too much of this, and another feels that there's not enough of this. So when does it stop? So how far do you go to the liberal side of just being free, and how far do you go to the restricted side of locking everything down? And I think, from my perspective, that both sides, Democrat and Republicans, have to come to a medium when we got to know when to stop, know when to pull things back, or we're going to just write a bill for everything. Nobody wrote a bill for blacks to receive anything from slavery. Nobody wrote a bill for blacks to get pain and suffering. Ain't nobody wrote a bill for any of that. We just ignore it, or as they say, we're going to study it.
Well, because there is a reparations bill.
To study it.
There is a reparations bill that was passed. It is a study bill.
A study bill.
And the individuals who are working on that study are actively at work at present. Because we talked about all of the different things and different concepts that come into play with respect to reparations.
Yes.
And while I know that we need to 100% have a totally separate podcast where we're just talking about reparations, and maybe even invite some of the folk who are working on it to come in.
Right. And I said that to say why you don't have a study bill on sexuality.
Oh. Why don't we have a study bill on sexuality?
So that everybody
Maybe
can have their
because
input.
no one ever introduced it.
Right. So we're going to introduce bill to pass and say this is it, but ain't nobody studying. You didn't do a round table. You didn't say what does the faith base talk about. Just like y'all did the bill for one-day marriage, because you guys come up with some bills a lot, but yet. You didn't have a round table and said, how is this going to affect this group of people, right? Because we only want to appease the group of people who asked for it, but not the group of people who's against it, because we never had the conversation. So even this proposal, and you got 6 of them on, but this proposal, number one, is just saying we didn't have no discussion. Was there any? Can you guys show me any data that talked about how the religious faith would respond from this, or was this proposal just presented to the people and as sheep to the slaughter, say vote on it, so that because we're thinking about we want to cover everything, so that's why they can slip stuff in because of the even the abortion side of it. Okay, the abortion, the sexual gender, all of that stuff now. Okay, but as a faith person, you're saying, oh no, that's against God's will. So the question is that I want to use a scenario of just because I need money, do I go rob the bank? No, it's wrong. Yes, I need money, but I can't rob the bank, right? So how do I get the money? So was that wrong?
You can go and apply for a loan at the bank. I mean, there's still access to the bank.
Well, yeah, there's access, but when I find out that my loan's been denied and all of that, I went through the whole process. At the end is it right that I steal? No. But I can't say because I was in need of it, I desire it, it becomes good. No. So the question again is that if you guys did a proper study on sexuality, because I haven't heard yet when there is a major discussion about sexuality. I just heard, okay, we talking about human rights, the LGBTQ plus IA, plus IA, that means it's going to continue. So if that means there's room for another alphabet to come. So with that entail, how do we now say, let's pull back something. Let's talk about this. Let's include other people so that when you do send a proposed bill, that it can say, we had discussion. We had community input. Remember I said that what I would advise those who are going to vote for the president election? Community. You have to engage in community. And I feel that government as a whole has not engaged with the total community. Because even when the presidents or whatever government, if you feel that you have that community, you don't talk to them. You go to the communities that you don't think you have. So you negate to spend time in the communities that actually put you in, that actually like you. But you're going to spend more time in communities you don't have versus the communities you have. So with all that, Assemblywoman, should that proposal have some type of dialogue? Yes. Should it just be passed without conversation? You might want to think about that. That's why you got pushback, that people don't want to just vote for something just because you said it's good. What about them? Or their feelings is no good? Oh, no, they become the bad person because they don't agree with what legislation or legislators say about this bill.
I don't know if it's good person, bad person.
No, I've experienced it. That because I don't agree with a lot of the things of the LGBTQ plus IA community, I'm now considered the black sheep. Don't go here because he's not going to agree with us. I've been said to my face that because you don't agree with my lifestyle, from city council speaker years ago that told me to my face, because you don't believe with our lifestyle, so therefore I'm not going to push this bill that will help everybody. Because I remember that conversation when we were doing living wages at that time. Mm-hmm. And I went to city council and I was pushing for living wages that helps everybody. Mm-hmm. And because I did not agree with lifestyle, you didn't want to hear me. So why is it good for them to not hear you, but I got to hear me, but I got to hear you? So how does that work?
I mean, we can get back to religion, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you love everyone. There are always going to be people who have opposing views to what it is that you believe in. But does it mean that in the exercise of humanity that, we put people into different buckets? I'm not hearing you, you're not hearing me, then That's just not the way government can work.
We living in the scriptures of Revelation. They gotta separate church and state.
Thank you all for joining us here at Church and State, because together we are Church and State.
Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And in the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Thank you so much.
Maybe I'm just rambling, but isn't it crazy that every time we lose and they win, they get richer?